Chaotic holiday weekends with big crowds are not a new phenomenon to Miami Beach. The roots go back at least 2 decades to Urban Beach Week and music festivals that attracted big crowds for big names in hip hop.
That actually is one of the reasons many see this racial component to the policing and the effort to change the culture, which, as you saw, beach leaders refute. Pierre Rutledge is the chair of Miami-Dade's Black Affairs Advisory Board. Pierre, it's great to have you on the show, and it's a long time coming, so welcome.
Pierre,
thank you for having me this morning, Michael and Glenna.
We are glad to see you. Pierre, I'm sure you just heard Mayor Gelber say that the state of emergency, the crackdown on the beach, was the result of bad behavior and not racial policy. What is your answer to that?
Michael, first of all, thanks for having me on your show this afternoon. It was revealing the sentiments of the mayor. I reject that. I think it was more of a planning and a sensitivity issue in dealing with people of African-American descent.
Explain that, because I think at the very end of the segment, where we really did press the mayor on that a little bit, it sounded to me like it was an age thing more than a race thing. I think that it sounded like the mayor wants older, more culturally aware, people interested in Art Deco, people interested in galleries, not 20-somethings out till 5 in the morning. Did you hear that at all?
Then I heard that, but I also heard the mayor saying that they don't want South Beach to have spring break when it comes to folks who look like me. Oftentimes, I really don't like to pull a race card, but you have to call balls, and you have to call strikes. What the mayor has said, and I'm gonna take you on a little journey. In the 80s, South Beach was what we see on Miami Vice. In the 90s, Gianni Versace, the famous designer, moved into Ocean Drive, and it became something different. Then we brought in Urban Beach Week during Memorial Day, and everything was fine. Fast forward another 20 years, all of a sudden, those things that sustained South Beach for many years are no longer wanted. And I am happy that the mayor has finally said that they don't want South Beach to be any part of spring break, whether it's Urban Beach Week or spring break earlier in March.
Yeah, Pierre, I have to say, what I heard the mayor say was, we don't want violence, we don't want bad behavior, and we don't really, as Glenna said, want a lot of young people. We would like older, you know, a little bit more sedate people to come, have a good time, spend money at the restaurants, the bars, hotels. I really didn't hear a racial component, but apparently you did.
Well, Michael, I'll take you back to 2019 when you had some Ocean Drive executives call the spring breakers classless, uneducated, people who cause problems. We have to embrace it. It is what it is. And we're trying to look at solutions to the problem. Will they come back next year? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but if they do, then what are we going to do?
Yeah, well, what is, in your view, and you are the chair of this important board, what is a solution, or two, what could the beach do to sort of ameliorate this really bad situation where they simply shut everything down and nobody can be over there really between midnight and 6 a.m.? No booze?
Well, Michael, some of these things are phenomenal. The state of emergency, right? A curfew. Are we saying that every time that there's a gun discharge, a fight, or civil or unrest on Miami Beach, regardless of who it is, that we're going to declare a state of emergency and we're going to implement a curfew? We'll be watching. Last year, this time, as a board, the Black Affairs Advisory Board offered our assistance to help come to the table to share some of our ideas on how we can make this thing successful. As far as I know, we were never called to the table. Secondly, if you're going to plan...
Before you go on to secondly, that's really interesting. What are some of those things that you proposed that were not heeded?
Number one, you have to bring the demographic to the table and basically ask them, what do you want? How do we make this experience a wholesome and safe experience for you? None of them were at the table. Number two, you have to give your visitors something to do. Right now, we offer beach and bars. We tried programming with the Miami Beach Live, but we missed it again. No dispersion against these artists, but we brought Alanis Morissette, who was hot in the 90s, and we brought Bernadette
Peters,
and you canceled her concert.
That's a Broadway singer for anybody who doesn't know.
Spring Breakers weren't even born when these artists were hot. Why is it that they can do it in Miami Gardens with Jazz in the Gardens,
right,
and other events, Rolling Loud? Why is it they can do it in Bayfront Park with Ultra, but we just can't get it right on Miami Beach?
So what was the answer to you? The programming idea has been around a couple of years. So that was never really addressed, programming the kind of concerts and music that would entertain people who enjoy, with all due respect to Bernadette Peters, she's not it. So what was the answer when you proposed that again? What was the answer to that?
It was too late. The city of Miami Beach had already spent almost $300,000 for someone who wasn't even from Miami to come up with programming. They involved some folks to come to the table to give them ideas on what the programming looked like. Well, you're doing programming for folks and you never ask them what do they want? What is their interest?
Yeah.
I may say Alanis Morissette, I may say Frankie Beverly and Mays, but most of the Spring Breakers weren't even born when these two groups were hot. These two artists were hot.
We understand. Bernadette Peters is sort of my generation. I think kids who are 20 have no idea. She's a great performer, but totally different genre of music. Pierre Rutledge, hold on. We've got more questions. Back with the chair of the Black Affairs Advisory Board in just a minute.
We are back with the Miami-Dade Black Affairs Advisory Board Chair, Pierre Rutledge. We're going to talk about a couple of different things, but before we switch off of spring break, Pierre, I wanted to sort of get your perspective on the stats that half of the crime and chaos on spring break week is actually imported right from across the Bay, and local criminals, because they are charged and many of them do have records, more than half of what's going on is really coming from there. And I would like to get your perspective on that.
Well, Glenna, here we go again. Using words like criminals. You don't know that to be the case.
Well, people who commit crimes are criminals. That's really the definition of what I meant.
that becomes race neutral.
That was my intention.
Commit a crime, you're a criminal.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
What I want to get at is, it doesn't matter if they're from across the bridge or if they're from Washington, D.C. It doesn't matter. These are visitors to Miami Beach who should be treated fairly, and there should be some programming to deal with it. And when you do that and it doesn't happen, then we own it. But it hasn't happened, and we've been looking for excuses.
So do you think
I want to direct you back.
Can I
direct you back to the boycott of Miami Beach years ago? This is nothing new on Miami Beach that we're going through, but we're willing as a community and as a board to help work through it. We're here to find solutions.
Right. So obviously, I guess my question to you is the programming for the visitors, for the legit people who come here to have a great time. Do you think the fact that people are coming in to take advantage of the crowds, would programming and that kind of thing go a long way to fix that? Is that one of the components?
Absolutely. You look at on the other side of the bay, it was a concert. Rolling Loud is a concert. Jazz in the Gardens is a concert. Spring break is what? Beer, bars, and beach. Glenna, when we look at this thing, we always have to remember, no matter if we want to call them criminals or not, we have to be equitable, diverse, and inclusive in everything we do, regardless of whether they're from Liberty City or Washington, D.C. It doesn't matter.
We get the message. Pierre, let me ask you, I know that there is in your family, I read a very good piece in the Miami Herald where you were talking about the fact that your grandmother worked on the beach, and she had in 1936 was required, as all black people were required then, to have an ID card in order to be in Miami Beach. So there is a history there. Talk a little bit about your grandmother and that ID card, please.
Well, Michael, historically, Miami Beach before integration was a place of work. You could go over there and work, but when the work hours were over, there was no Ocean Drive with the bars and restaurants. You had to come back across the bridge. And in order to do that, they actually gave you an ID with your name and your picture on it, like a license to work on Miami Beach if you were African American.
Right, and that lasted until 1964, when the
Absolutely.
Federal Civil Rights Act was passed. That is when that stopped.
And you're right, Michael. We've seen a pattern. It ebbs and flows. 64, then we moved up to the 80s when Ocean Drive was basically gutted. It was part of what you saw on Miami Vice and Scarface. And then the late Gianni Versace came. Then we had a boycott along the way. I'm not sure the year where we were boycotting Miami Beach, and the economic impact is what brought them to the table.
Yeah.
I submit that if we take the economics out of spring break and they start missing the money, the bars start closing down, and the beaches aren't full and the hotels are not at 90% occupancy, then we'll get their attention. All we want to do, Michael, we want everybody to come and have a safe, wholesome environment, and it works both ways. Government's going to have to get involved. Citizenry is going to have to get involved. And our kings and queens who come here to Miami Beach from around this country, who see the promotions that said Miami Beach Live, when they come to Miami Beach, it's not live for them. It's live for somebody else. Let's be fair. Let's be equitable. And let's be inclusive. That's all that we ask. And as a board, we are volunteering our time to come to the table and try. That's all we can do, Michael. But I think that the optics nationally, as the mayor said, are really bad. I've had folks text me, call me, say, hey, be careful on Miami Beach. They have a state of emergency, which would normally come when you have a natural disaster, hurricane, civil unrest, an armed conflict, or pandemic. None of what happened last weekend meets that criteria. I'm sorry. I'm not an attorney, but I'm just reading the definition.
We are out of time. You have our complete support in everything fair and equitable now and always. And I hope as the chair of the AAB, you will be back often on our program. Thanks so much.
Pierre, thank you.
Thanks for having me, and I'm available at any time.
Excellent.
Great.